By way of introduction, Logigear is a SOS partner with over 20 years experience in developing and implementing leading test practices. And today we have a fantastic speaker in Michael Hackett, who's going to talk about a topic that I think is on pretty much every tester's mind, which is continuous delivery and how do you get to continuous delivery. Also from SOS Labs, we have Kevin Berg, who is a solution engineer, who will give his insights into testing best practices and answer any questions you have about SOS Labs and how SOS Labs works. Hi, my name is Ken Drachnik, and I'll be moderating today's session. And as we did in the introduction, and please enter your questions in the Q&A panel on the right-hand side, typically of your screen, and we'll get to those as we go through the presentation. And if there are a lot of questions, we'll save some for the Q&A at the very end. And again, as a final reminder, we are recording this session, so look for a link to the recording in your inbox in the next few days, and feel free to share that with your colleagues if they're not able to attend this session live today. And with that, I'll hand it over to Michael.
Okay, Ken, thank you. Nice introduction. Hi, welcome everybody. So today we're going to be talking about a lot of automation stuff in continuous delivery. So I want to start by looking at what the problem is, kind of defining what the problem is. We're going to talk about lean and what lean is. I want to address and kind of attack this notion of what regression is and what regression has come to mean. We'll talk a little bit about what continuous delivery is. I think most people will have a little bit of an understanding already of what continuous delivery is. And then we'll start talking about some solutions, right? How can we change our automation to be more successful in continuous delivery? So this thing with continuous delivery, it sounds great, the benefits are great, get product to customers really fast, everybody wants to use the cool tools, it's really great, right? The problem is most people have these giant monolithic regression suites that take days, on a good day it might take overnight, but it might take 5 days or longer to run. Also, organizations might not have all their important tests automated. They may have a backbone of automation, but a bunch of the important tests are still run manually. And I also see in my work that there's still people who have to run the automation themselves, right? Whether it's setting up data or kicking off machines, or that there are rough spots in the automation that they have to manually tackle. These all have to be resolved, right? The whole goal of CD is that an automated a tool can just kick these automated tests off and can, send things down the pipeline, give great immediate feedback, yes or no, promote or not promote. If we can't resolve some of these problems, continuous delivery is not going to happen. So to set the stage for this, I want to talk about the automation spectrum as it is today. So Logigear did a survey last year where we asked people about how much automated testing they have. And surprisingly to us, about 75% of the organizations, 75% of the responding organizations had 25% or less of their testing automated, right? So whether it was none at all, 20%, actually 1 in 5 organizations had no automation at all, it was 100% manual, but 75% had 25% or less, 10% or less, or no automation. This is clearly not going to get you on the road to continuous delivery. But for the organizations that have these substantial automation suites, and even the organizations that don't, we know that automation isn't optional, right? We also know that this myth of automate everything is just that, it's a myth. There's no way that you can automate everything, and there's actually no need to, right? When we say automate everything, there are some organizations with hundreds of thousands of tests that are constantly running on all these on-prem virtual machines and just constantly doing this continuous testing thing of running these hundreds of thousands of tests over and over. And there's varieties of that, people running tens of thousands of tests and hundreds of tests. Every team, regardless of where you are on the automation spectrum, needs to make more lean and mean regression suites, right? We need to get through some of these hurdles and moving toward continuous delivery. Some other blocks I want to talk about that we have to deal with in challenging your regression is, it's very common that people have a lot of false positives and false negatives that take a long time to analyze. Like you may have this painful data setup to do, or the automation maintenance time could be big, or you're in this tough state where your regression suite is giant, so you have some kind of pass rate where you say like, oh, well, if we have a 90% pass rate, we'll still release it on to the next phase. Well, will still promote to the next environment or go, release out to whatever the next stage is. Well, if you run 10,000 tests and you have a 90% pass rate, which, by the way, I think many companies wish they had a 90% pass rate, but if you're running 10,000 tests and you have a 90% pass rate, that means 1,000 tests fail. So great, we have 1,000 tests fail, let's promote to the next environment because 1,000 tests failing is okay. That any hope of having continuous delivery or pipeline automation with these kind of states is really unsustainable. So when you say you have a 90% pass rate, that even 10% of the tests fail, that doesn't mean 10% of the tests failing means there's 1,000 bugs, right? We all know that, right? It's just 1,000 tests fail. You have to pull some smart person off of their work just to analyze those 1,000 tests to figure out how many of them were just, flappers, cascading failures, environment issues, timeouts, all those other things that cause tests to fail that are probably not even, bugs or those kinds of issues. So this situation can't continue if we really want to be successful in continuous delivery. And how we got here was there has been this big pressure that every test has to be automated. We have these great tools. Sometimes we just automate tests because we could automate them, regardless of the value, right? There might be low value tests, but we automated them. Or somebody comes up with some kind of mythic number like you have to have 75% of your tests automated or 80% of your tests should be automated, and then you're doing a good job. And those are ridiculous, non-existent standards that kind of maybe they have an internal meaning to you, but this idea of automating so many tests just because we could is turning into a problem. And even with organizations who really have good ideas about what to automate, there's probably some definition of done criteria, like every acceptance criteria has to have an automated test. This is a good thing. It can be a positive thing, but it can lead to these giant regressions we have to do something about, right? So for CD, we need fast running tests, fast running immediate feedback, fast running as in minutes to run or maybe an hour, but not days, not multiple days of running this automation. So the tests have to be easy to run, easy to troubleshoot, easy to analyze, and it has to be meaningful. It has to give good, valuable feedback. Well, what I see is that for many organizations, that's a pipe dream. They can be difficult to run, and they can be especially difficult to troubleshoot and especially difficult to analyze. That example I gave a couple of minutes ago of having 1,000 failed tests, somebody has to go through all those. And if you're using a good tool and you have error codes and you have good ways to sort through those tests, it still can take a long time for somebody to go through and figure out, okay, of all those failed tests, what are the ones that are actual bugs that we have to deal with, and what are ones that are just failing because of any myriad reason why. So even when you're using sauce slabs to make the running of the tests easy, right? The machine part, the device part, the browser part, it's a great solution for that, but it still doesn't tackle the automation side, right? So what I'm talking about here are the problems on the automation side. So let's look at this regression thing. To me, regression is a big misunderstood word. And I say misunderstood because some companies have never really defined what regression is to them, where the regression is you're rerunning all of your automated tests or all of your automated and manual tests, or you're just running your P1s, your priority one automated test cases, or your P1s and P2 automated test cases, or you have some kind of happy path regression or most common path. There's many varieties of core functionality, main functionality that people have defined regression, which, it would be worse if people didn't define regression, but hopefully you have one of these definitions. The issue is the time to execute these is different, and that impacts the coverage and the risk, right? So if I'm going to do a full regression, the time to execute that is going to be a long time to execute all my automated tests in many organizations. The good thing is the coverage is high and the risk is low, right? Because we're running all of these tests. But now in CD, the problem of the time to execute becomes the gating issue. We can't take that monolith and have it be 5 days of execution. You could execute, your core functionality. That's going to be a reduced time to execute, which is good for CD. But the problem is the coverage is going to go down. If I'm not going to run all my tests, I'm only going to run my core functionality. You're running less tests. If I'm running less tests, the risk goes up. And we're going to talk a couple of times about risk going up. the minute you say risk going up, people start squirming in their seat. They're like, well, we can't have risk go up. This is a cultural, one of the big cultural issues, I think, in continuous delivery is managing the risk, right? You're never going to eliminate risk, but we can manage it. And if we're really going to cut down on the number of tests we run to get immediate feedback, we're going to have to manage this idea of risk. So one of the first things we have to do to manage this new regression dynamic and continuous delivery is get a great definition of regression and understand that that's going to impact the time to execute, the coverage that suite's going to have, and the risk associated with that coverage. So we also have to rethink what and when we run those tests. So I just ran through a couple of things like full regression. Well, do you have to run your full regression at every point during the pipeline? You most likely can't. Where do you run your core functionality? Where do you run your full end-to-end automated suite? You don't have to run every test at every place in the pipeline, right? One of the goals that I always suggest to teams doing continuous delivery is we need to move to multiple smaller suites to run at different places in the pipeline. And we're going to come back to that point a couple of times. I want to move on to talk about lean now. Lean to me is this stealth topic that not enough people know about. I think lean has had a massive impact on the way we develop software today. And people still talk about Agile and they talk about Scrum or they talk about CD without getting a good idea of the underpinning of all of these methodologies and mindsets is lean and lean software development. So lean has these 7 principles, right? If you're going to summarize lean, the most important part of lean is eliminate waste, right? You could say that that's lean by itself. But the other principle with lean, amplify learning, just in time, deliver as fast as possible, right? CD, the whole thing about CD is based on deliver as fast as possible, right? Get the product into the customer's hands, get it delivered as fast as you can to get feedback on it. Is it a function that they want? Are they going to use it? How would they change it? Does it work? All of those feedback things that we need to do that, you have to deliver as fast as possible. Empowering the team, quality at every step, and see the whole quality at every step. The idea that you do one thing, test it, do one thing, test it, do one thing, test it, do one small thing and test it. That's pretty much CD, right? So eliminate waste. When you have these big automated suites, cut what's not needed. Stay focused on what changed. Run the essential tests and no extras. This is very easy for me to say, right? But I know it's a very tough decision and it's probably going to increase risk. This is where the cultural shift that happens during CD, right? If there were cultural changes during Agile, there's even bigger cultural changes during continuous delivery. The idea of massive collaboration, that you can collaborate with your team and let them know we're cutting our tests and these are the tests we're going to run, these are the tests we're not going to run. This is the risk that I anticipate from running this smaller but more efficient set of tests, right? So eliminate waste. Sounds easy, it's tough. Cutting tests is not something people usually volunteer for, right? Because it is going to increase risk, but increase your communication, increase your collaboration. Deliver as fast as possible. CD is based upon immediate feedback, not only from if we're talking about the kind of test automation, whether it's UI driven or API driven, immediate feedback from developer having unit tests that are in repeatable formalized suites that they're going to run again and again. It's getting immediate feedback for this little change, a small isolated change that we made that we put into the production, the pipeline. Does it work or does it not work? And obviously 5 days to run an automation suite. And I picked 5 days as some arbitrary number, but honestly, I can't tell you how many clients I go to in a year have just that, have these automated suites that take multiple days or even I'm not picking particularly on overnight regression, but we can. Overnight is not immediate feedback, right? But getting immediate feedback to have tests to deliver our immediate feedback as fast as we can so that people can fail fast, right? So the developer can commit a chunk of code and know within an hour it worked or it didn't work. It did what we wanted or it didn't do what we wanted, and then can try again with an hour of feedback, not an overnight of feedback. So many organizations that are doing CD, right, they want to build multiple times a day. They want to send things through the pipeline multiple times a day. And I should say, I don't even want to talk about, I think if you're listening to this and you're struggling with your automation and trying to get your automation to run maybe more effectively and more efficiently or faster, we can't even talk about those organizations, the famous ones that are writing all these, articles that are great about doing continuous delivery, continuous deployment, where they are deploying to production, 100 times a day, and even that number is small for some people. But those organizations seem to be past that hurdle, or they would have to be past that hurdle of these giant monolithic regression suites and have much more economical running times, right? But even the idea that you could deliver multiple times a day, right? Clearly, you can't run an overnight set of automated tests to get feedback when you're trying to deliver multiple times a day. And then quality at every step, right? Do something small, test it. Do something small, test it. No big, giant block of tests that we're going to run at the end of development or at the end of some release cycle in CD. That just doesn't exist anymore. Another thing about quality at every step that I brought this idea up a couple minutes ago is that, you could have some, let's say, core functionality regression suite that's going to be smaller and faster, leaner to run. But how often is that test important to run at each phase in the pipeline, right? You may have tests that are important, but you don't need to run them at every step. So you need quality at every step. There has to be automated tests at every step, but you may not need to run them all, and we need to re-examine that. Okay, so moving on to CD this, write some code, test it, do a build, test it, package it, test it, release it, test it. This quality at every step thing. You've all seen diagrams of the CD pipeline and what it looks like. Is just that, right? Do something small, right? That shift for some organizations of, instead of doing these bigger sized releases, doing small releases. Do something small, test it. Do something, test it. Do something, test it. Push it through the pipeline to be delivered. So that's CD. Now the automation strategy changes that I'm going to suggest here. Many teams have actually never had an automation strategy. That surprises me when I go to see different clients during a year, but some teams have just automated because they could, and having a strategy was like never important because there was this notion of more automation, which is, fine. Some people think it's heresy for me to say, wait, get rid of that more idea. This isn't about more. This is about meaningful tests. This is about high value tests. I know in the old days we used to try and calculate ROI for automation, well, which is, it's an intangible kind of thing. We can, come up with ballparks for ROI, but not every test has the same value, right? I don't believe we have to calculate ROI for every test, but certain tests have higher value, and certain tests, even if they're well-meaning, just might not be great value for automation. And this led some people to have these big, bloated, slow regression suites that are just not going to make it in CD, right? And it also is going to take a bunch of time to clean out your tests, clean out old tests, clean out duplicate tests. And it's that there's an investment to that. There's an engineering project in going to pull out and clean out and get rid of old and duplicate tests. I was at a client's a couple of months ago where I was talking to a couple of people, and in the meeting that we were having about the regression suite, it came up that the two of the participants in the meeting, one had been on the team the other person was on now, they at this point developed a whole bunch of duplicate tests because the one person didn't understand the other person's automation, so they just wrote a whole bunch of new tests. So there were a whole bunch of duplicates that they didn't even realize were duplicates until that meeting, and yet everybody had been afraid to pull tests out, right? Nobody really wants to get rid of automation because of that fear of increasing risk. Well, At this point, if you really want to do CD, too bad. You're going to have to go in and clean out, do an engineering project to go and clean out a whole bunch of old tests. Retiring tests makes people feel nervous, right? So this thing about bloated and slow, I've said that a couple of times. My mantra in automation is not more, more, more. My mantra in automation is lean and mean. Automation has to be lean and mean, right? We need smarter, better, more focused suites, getting rid of old tests. So when I say lean and mean, what I mean is if you could have a test that tests some scenario that your users do, great. Well, instead of running some kind of happy path right down the middle, easy to execute, this has to work, why not make it an edge case? Why not make it a boundary case? Things are more likely to fail on the boundary anyway, right? And if I want to know if the test fails, if I want immediate feedback, run the boundary, run with boundary data, right? Run with data that is going to come really close to making the test fail, that if that works, you can have more confidence that the function is stronger and more robust, rather than running a test that's not the most efficient, but is this notion of, well, that's what the marketing team is going to demo, or that's what the sales team is going to demo during how our product works. Don't automate those. Just automate a boundary case. It's more effective. It's going to fail faster. It's going to give you better feedback. Also, with this lean and mean, as opposed to bloated and slow, traceability. Now, traceability should bring nightmares to certain people. That that old topic that we used to be concerned with, all this paperwork, and it was overhead, and why do traceability? Well, turns out that if you do trace your automated test back to a chunk of code, or back to a user story, or back to some test case database that you're using, tracing and tagging is really going to make running tests a whole lot more efficient, right? That I can write a test and say it tests this chunk of code. Well, every time we change that chunk of code, I can easily pull those tests out. And when I say easily, you're not just going to rely on me to manually pull a set of regression suite based on some change set. It's automated, right? We can pull all the tests that are traced to that chunk of code, run those, or really good effective tagging that this test tests that function and that function, right? So anytime I change one of those functions, I can go and pull that test because of really good effective tagging. And prioritizing tests. That idea that a regression suite could be, running your P1s or running your P1s and P2s. The thing about prioritizing tests, it sounds great. It's easy to do when you're writing the tests, but priorities change over time. That I could write an automated test and call it a P1 because right now it's a P1 for what we're developing. Well, in a year, guess what? It turns out that test is still a P1, and at this point, it should probably be a P3 or P4, and I may not need to run it all the time. Features out, we fixed a couple of bugs, it's stable, it's out there, but I never took the time to go back and clean up those priorities because it takes time. There's an investment to going back and cleaning up these automated tests, especially when they're bloated and you have so many. We need to kind of change that idea, that we need to invest more time in grooming, cleaning, having the automated suite be more lean and mean. All right. I want to talk about automation strategy at a lower level for a minute, and this idea of having atomic or decoupled small isolated tests versus workflows, transactions, spaghetti or stringy tests that are really what users do. So I hear this debate a lot about well, we don't want our tests to flap, we don't want them to fail, so we're running these small isolated atomic tests, right? They're isolated so that when it fails, I pretty much know what's going on. Well, that's great. But there's another side that argues, but that's not what our customers do. Our customers don't do isolated individual features by themselves. They'll go and do a task, right? They'll have some kind of workflow or some kind of task where you have to do function 1, then function 2, then function 3, then function 4, go back and edit function 2, then go do function 3, 4, and that's the task, right? So what do you automate? Remember that these tests, they serve different purposes, right? They do different things. Oh, let me add this. Why not just automate everything as scenarios and workflows, these bigger, longer tests? Because it's what your customers do. It makes sense. All of your tests should be that. Well, they're harder to automate. They break more. They're harder to analyze. If one of those scenarios, one of the longer test breaks, it's going to take me longer to analyze, and it could have failed for 5 different reasons, right? Any one function along that path could have broken, or I don't think I need to go into why those tests fail. If you're on this webinar, you know why those bigger, longer tests fail, right? For a myriad of reasons that there may not even be a bug. It could be just some, a maintenance issue caused the test to fail. So why don't we automate all those workflows? Well, remember that both tests are essential, but they do different things, right? First, you in a more isolated way, you find out if the function works, but then later on in development, when the product is more complete, or you're in a more complete environment, then you run these bigger, longer workflow tests. So it's a matter of scale, right? You need both types, but to be more efficient, all of your tests cannot be those isolated individual functions, because that's not what your users do. But on the other hand, all of your tests can't be these big, long, stringy tests. So having a strategy, collaborating with your team and deciding which of the bigger, longer transaction workflow tests do we have to run, and where do we run them in the pipeline? Maybe you don't run those tests until you get to more of a staging environment, when the system is more complete, when the pipeline already has said that all the individual isolated functions work. Now that we're getting closer to delivering or deploying, now we can run the bigger, longer tests. So it's a matter of strategy. It's a matter of communication, right? And both tests are important. So when I say automation strategy, I mean this kind of deciding what we're going to automate and what we're not going to automate. Also, good frameworks can reduce this maintenance and kind of false positive, false negative thing. Better test design can help, of course, right? But merely having a good framework is not going to fix this. So, to summarize this, the automation side of this CD regression thing, I really think everybody needs to define regression. I see this all over. People think they have a good understanding of what regression is, but regression is often this blob or mess that's kind of ill-defined, and that the team doesn't understand these various times to execute and the coverage and the risk associated, right? Next, define your automation goals and the strategy, how you're going to automate, what you're going to automate. You should also have multiple suites, not just this one big monolithic, as I've been repeating that same word, right? Not just a big monolithic suite, but multiple suites, and also communicate to your team coverage and risk. So yeah, I've talked about this having multiple suites. I don't need to go into that multiple suites again, but lots of lean and mean automated suites, right? I might have a suite of tests about mock APIs, but then when it goes maybe to the next environment where we've tied in the live APIs, now I'm going to run a different suite that now that I know the function works, I can run a different set of tests with different goals, right? So a part of this conversation that really deserves its own webinar, this conversation of amounts of what we test at the UI level, at the API, at the unit level. I hope everybody has seen this already. This idea of moving from a majority of your tests being UI driven to a much smaller number of UI driven tests, CD being the foundation of CD. Really, anytime you go and read articles about CD or read that great continuous delivery book by David Farley and Jez Humble, it's really reliant on giant unit testing suites. I don't mean giant in size, but profound, repeatable unit testing suites, right? So one of the ways that we can optimize our automation is discerning what are we doing at the UI, what are we doing at the API level, and what are we doing at the unit level. As I said, this really requires its own webinar, its own study, because I even think that this theoretical thing can mislead some people to think that we're ever going to get that kind of giant number of unit tests and be able to shrink our UI tests really small. It's a great theory, right? It's a great goal to have, and some organizations do this. And I think some organizations just the amount of UI tests they have, the idea that they could ever shrink that number so low would mean, basically throwing out and starting over, which most organizations are not willing to do. So anyway, this idea of flipping the automation triangle is a separate topic that's going to have a big impact on this automation thing. Rethinking your test automation priorities, right? How we prioritize, how you tag, how you trace. Key solution for trimming down the size of your automation suite. So to kind of wrap this up, I want to talk about some solution ideas if you have very little or no automation, if you have the big giant automation suites and you're moving to CD, or you just have big automation suites and you're not moving to CD, but you have hesitated to cleaning them up and throwing them out and making them more lean and mean. So for organizations who have little to no automation, I would say start right now. Start small. There's no reason I've yet to see an organization, even though I go to clients every year, that are just now beginning in 2018, just now beginning to do test automation, where there are technical problems or there are no tools available, where they can't start automation right now. Some people have just never taken the time to start now, but do it right. Define automation, define the goals for automation, get help. If you haven't started automation yet, it's probably because you don't have that technical ability in-house to do it. Well, get some help to do it. Start small, start with smoke tests. Data-driven tests are always really good to get started. A small number of scripts, but pumping a whole bunch of data through it, right? So understanding data-driven testing can help you develop a small suite of tests that you can make sure that that small suite of tests, it runs well, they're not failing, and then just pump a whole bunch of data through it to accomplish a bunch of your manual testing through a small number of automated data-driven tests, with very few maybe end-to-end or workflow tests, because they tend to break more, right? They tend to be more flappy. So again, that's part of automation strategy. But also, if you're new to automation, tag your tests. Do traceability. It's not just about paperwork anymore, right? Trace your tests back to chunks of code and make sure you prioritize well and go back in and clean those things up over time. If you are moving to CD, and these types of organizations that I've been using as my guinea pigs, where you have these giant automation suites, you have to be ruthless and merciless in cutting tests, period. To go from bloated and slow to lean and mean is going to be some very hard decisions, right? I'm not saying that this is easy, but you're going to have to be ruthless cutting tests. Use traceability, use tagging. It may require its own project to go back through and clean up a bunch of traceability or tagging that wasn't done when the tests were originally created. Be merciless about that. Examine isolated functional tests. If you have a whole lot of these decoupled isolated tests, well, if they run at the unit level, maybe you don't need to run them through the UI. If they run at the API level, maybe you don't need to run them at the UI level, and you can cut those tests. Right? But also get rid of boring and low value tests. Even if you are somewhat hesitant to get rid of tests, when you're being ruthless about your tests, get rid of boring tests. If they're not testing interesting things, get rid of them. Low value tests, get rid of them. And do end-to-end workflows, but keep this. I normally am a big rah-rah about end-to-end, these big workflow, these big path tests. They're really great, and sometimes people forget them. Do them, right? But keep it in perspective. Keep the number smaller. If you're not moving to CD, but you do need to overhaul your automation, be careful not to over-automate low-value tests, right? You may not be under the pressure of having immediate feedback where you need to run your whole automated suite in an hour, right? Maybe your team, your company's happy not doing CD and happy with overnight regressions, but still be careful to not over-automate low-value tests. Define an economic test strategy, right? Not this more thing. Keep the goal of lean and mean. And everybody these days is focusing on lower level tests, right? Lower level in that triangle. Unit level tests, more important than API tests, more important than UI tests. All right. So to summarize this whole thing, get a better grip on your automated test suite. Define what success is going to look like for your CD, right? If you have these giant suites, if your team wants you to be successful, you need an hour worth of automation. It may take you a year. It may take you an engineering project of a year to rebuild your automation that's going to run in an hour and not run overnight. Be selective, make smarter choices about automation, and spring cleaning. Right? Regularly go in and clean out your tests. I know that this is hard because everybody's busy. Everybody's busy. Everybody has a lot of work to do, but not the opposite choice is just as risky. I think the choice of not going in and cleaning out your tests, reprioritizing, deleting tests, retiring tests, the opposite choice is then you wind up with these tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of tests that might not be the highest value. Right? That example I gave a little bit earlier, if they'd ever taken, that organization that I mentioned where they had the two guys in the meeting had turned out to have developed a whole bunch of duplicate tests because they weren't tagged right, they weren't traced, they'd never talked to each other, and it wasn't like they never talked to each other on purpose, they just didn't know that it was a good idea to talk about what was automated and what wasn't automated. They're having a big project now to just go in and clean out their tests, try and clean out a whole bunch of stale and duplicate tests, and they're estimating it's going to take them a year to go and do that. And then watch your diet. Lean and mean, the mantra is lean and mean. The mantra is not more, 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 it's lean and mean. Again, to summarize this, traceability, tagging, priority things, smaller is beautiful. Smaller, more effective tests is better than just automating because we can automate. Keep the automated tests simple, right? The test can be complicated, but keep the automation simple, keep the design simple. And it's always important for me to reiterate to people, make sure that you write tests that you don't have to run. I think in big organizations, this is going to seem like a redundant point, but every year I go to organizations where people might have to manually kick things off or manually set things up. Make sure that you're not tied to the automation that the whole idea about these pipeline automation tools is that the pipeline can kick off these things, right? Make sure that you're not the only person who can run your tests. All right, that's all I wanted to get out. I'll pass it back to you, Ken, if you want to pick up from here.
Yeah, Michael. Hey, that was fascinating. It's interesting. I know a lot of our listeners are probably kind of newer to automation and newer to the whole, CI/CD thing. And you made a great statement of focusing your tests focus on lower level tests first, right? And automate those lower level tests. How do you recommend people kind of get started in automated testing? If they're looking at this and they say, this whole automated testing thing is daunting, right? I don't know where to start. What's your recommendation to people on how do they get started in this?
That's a great question, and I see that in a lot of organizations that I go to. I first want to say that organizations that, I said this a little while ago, organizations that don't have automation in 2018 are either new organizations and they're just getting started, which is fine, but if they're older organizations, they may not have the technical capacity inside the company. If they're not automating yet, there's probably a reason why. So don't just jump in, don't just get a tool and start automating. You can start, but have an automated strategy. Maybe get some help. Maybe do a pilot project where you're doing a proof of concept to see how the tool is going to talk to your application. Building out a framework, some of these ideas like data-driven testing or just automating a small amount for a smoke test. Everything I just said in the last minute, if those words aren't words that you commonly use, or your head is getting dizzy already thinking about data-driven testing and smoke testing and frameworks and doing a proof of concept, get help. Right? Automation is software development, right? If I was just speaking on automation and not on CD or lean or something, automation is software development. It needs to be architected. It needs to be designed. There have to be product goals. Automation is software, and it's not just buying a tool. I hope that most companies are past that idea. Most people in IT, right? I hope that most people who work in software development are past the idea that automation is just about buying a tool. To me, the tool is honestly irrelevant. There are so many good tools out there. There's so many great tools that do, if I want to automate on my handset, on my phone, automation using Appium and using Selenium and using all the automated tools that are out there. There's great automated tools out there, but structuring the program, actually having a software development program built around test automation, we have to approach automation like it's software development. So you can get started, but maybe get help, maybe do it right, treat it like a software development project with goals and a strategy. How about that?
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's what a lot of people, when they start looking at this problem, right, you have to break it apart. There's a test creation aspect to it. Mm-hmm. There's a test management aspect and a test execution aspect. And I think where people get confused is how do I approach this all at once? And I think you said it right. Automation is software development. And really, that's the test creation aspect and the test creation strategy that's really key to start with a solid foundation there.
Right. Great. And you say the test case management part. When I talked about tagging and tracing and prioritizing, having a methodology or a strategy for your test case management, using a method like data-driven testing, using action-based testing, using keywords, having page objects, building these frameworks that are going to help you not only in the test case production, but in the automation script management. Managing scripts is, as you brought up, just as important as a creation.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we know from a lot of our customers, a lot of them are getting back towards, how do I do smaller functional tests and do these many more of those early on, so that by the time I get to these integration tests where I have to access resources, or by the time I'm doing regression tests, I can minimize the number of failures and minimize the number of flaky tests I get there, because I've done the majority of that functional test way ahead of time.
You bring up an interesting point. I would suggest that anybody who's listening to this go read an article, a white paper, or a book on CD. And when you do, you might be surprised at how the focus is on unit testing. It's not on like UI-driven testing, GUI-driven testing, even like UI browser-based testing, whatever, is often considered an afterthought. In hardcore CI, that's kind of an afterthought. Everything is done at the unit level. It's this us being focused on this UI thing. It's been a shock to me at how we have turned, or this kind of user side testing has gotten a different place. In the CD culture, it has a different place. So lower level automation, unit testing level automation is really the big push these days. So having things tested at the lowest level possible, at the lowest functional level, and not at the highest level in that triangle is really where CD is going, or where it is already.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we see that in a lot of our engagements with customers as well, is that it's everything is pushing left to those lower, smaller groups of tests. You had some other slides here, I think some contact information and things.
Oh, sure.
Sure.
If anybody wants to email me, contact me, my email address, michaelh@logigear.com. I have some LinkedIn information. And if you, I do a lot of consulting work and I publish a lot of these things, and we have this great Logigear magazine that we publish quarterly, and we do a lot on DevOps and continuous testing, continuous delivery. So thank you for reminding me about that. So there you go.
Yeah, Michael, thank you so much. We don't have any other questions here in the panel. Thanks for the information. It was a very engaging talk. And all of you who are on the webinar today, again, we have recorded this, so look for an email in the next few days with a link to the recording and slides.
Great, thank you, Ken.
Thanks all. This concludes our webinar.